Good afternoon, everyone. I am here with Harold Reeves. He is the regional product manager for the mobile computing the regional product manager for the mobile computing platform here in North America for Zebra. One of the things that I wanted Harold to explain was in the past we were selling devices that were GMS devices or Android open source devices. There was, basically a different version of the OS depending upon the device that was purchased. We're seeing now much more of a trend going to full GMS, and there's some changes going on in the industry that I want Harold to review for everyone. Harold, thanks so much for spending time with us this afternoon. Could you share your thoughts?
Absolutely. Thanks again for the opportunity, Mark. When we look at GMS in the enterprise, there's a couple of things. Number one, from a Zebra perspective, let's be real clear that in North America we'll release a GMS SKU, but we're going to have a feature that lets us go back and mimic Android open source. It'll be called GMS Restricted, and that's something that we want to be sure that a customer that knows about Android open source or liked the posture that they got with Android open source, that we're not taking that away, we're just implementing it differently. There's a great feature of economies of scale for Zebra to be able to release one OS and not have to do multiple SKUs or multiple regression tests as we release each new operating system. It's good for us, and it should help us control costs as we're bringing product to market. But we do have a number of customers looking at GMS, and you've got an influence from Google in the marketplace to have a ready for enterprise Android offering, and Zebra's right there at the forefront. And we got some trends that we see from our customers on why they like GMS and what's going to make GMS work well for them in their deployments. And the first thing is that the cloud's just more prevalent. We're seeing cloud applications deployed not just in our mobile computers, but on desktops and in other configurations, and there's a comfort level that's being established with the cloud around availability and security and access. Those are all things that people are getting more and more comfortable with. And so by having a cloud acceptance in the marketplace and with our customer base, we're seeing GMS be more interesting to our deployments and to our customers as they look at how they deploy. We also see an increased interest in leveraging public applications that are published in the store. Things that are available. The code's already written, and we can reuse that for a simple fee. Why go and reinvent the wheel? And we're seeing that in more and more customers. We're also seeing a demand for the Chrome browser, which is only bundled in with GMS now. The Chrome browser, you may write and exploit some of the handles and the features in the Chrome browser, and if you want to do that, and you want to utilize it, then you've got to use the GMS drop for the Android operating system. Now, Zebra has some alternatives with Enterprise Browser that give you a very similar experience and would allow customers not to be locked into the Chrome browser, but we're seeing that as just something that people are driving towards. We also see that a lot of developers are utilizing GMS services like the Firebase Cloud Msg capability, and that's something, if you want that, you're going to have access to GMS, and you're going to need to utilize it. And when you want to utilize it and it's right for your app and your deployment, then you're going to be a GMS customer and you're going to deploy that. We're also seeing some abstraction in GMS from Google that makes app development easier. So the ability to utilize location services with activity recognition or geofencing or Wi-Fi locationing. There's some capabilities that Google's just making flat easier for developers and deployment architects to put in and utilize. So when we look at that, it's great. We also see that Google is continuing to promote getting features into GMS and taking things out of Android open source. So they've greatly reduced, if not removed, their investment in the Android open source project. And all new features and all new things are coming into GMS. So if you want that feature, you're going to need to implement GMS into the approach. There's also more flexibility from our friends at Google in terms of allowing control of your device. And so certainly one of the strategies from Zebra from the beginning is deploying Android or deploying an operating system the way that fits your use case. We allow the patching on your schedule or the down rev of a device when you first put it out first receive it from us in a new shipment. If you'd like to take it back to an older operating system, we allow all that. And Google's allowing the ability to control with the enterprise Play Store capabilities, enterprise app configurations. You can control your versioning and limit random things going into your environment. So there's a lot more flexibility from Google. And like I mentioned at the top, Zebra GMS Restricted. If you want to have that feel of the Android open source, Zebra's got that ready to go in a feature that you can turn on from the beginning, and lock out the GMS features and take the device back to acting the way Android open source did in our older products. Now let's call out and be real clear that GMS Restricted is on our newer portfolio. The device is starting with the Android O operating system, Oreo, in the TC52, TC57, TC72, TC77, PS20. Those products all ship with one operating system, GMS, and have the GMS Restricted benefits. If you go backwards in our portfolio, there's not a need for GMS Restricted mode because we're posting GMS or Android open source operating system with each release.
So in my mind, I was watching you go through those 8 different bullet points there, and I kept looking at between number 6 and number 8. If a customer, partner, what have you, either one, if up until now they weren't sure maybe what the difference between Android open source was versus GMS, I mean, and you're talking about being able to still buy a GMS device but restrict it so they get that open source experience. What were some of the differences between those experiences be? So if a customer isn't quite aware of what Android open source is compared to GMS, I mean, GMS stands for Google Mobile Services. With that comes what compared to open source?
That's a great question, and it's a long answer, but let me put it in just a couple of terms that are probably the signals for our partner community and communicating with our customers.
Perfect.
When we talk about Google Mobile Services, the number one thing that comes with Google Mobile Services is something we experience as consumers in access to the Play Store. So a GMS-based operating system interacts with the Play Store. Once you have a Google ID, you can download apps, you can interact with the Play Store, and you can get updates through the Play Store distribution model. Now, Google has some enhancements to that for the enterprise where you can create your own little walled-off enterprise space and create enterprise IDs, and you can create a subset of devices, and that's how they kind of have been working to make GMS more enterprise-friendly. But that's probably the number one thing that we can work with and understand. What does that mean, GMS, Google Mobile Services? After that, after the Play Store and interaction with the Play Store on updates, it gets down into how applications work. And so a simple example would be if you wanted to write an application and utilize location features, an app developer can use the GMS libraries to open up Google Maps as an example and give you location data from the Google Maps cloud services and cloud resources. So that's a very simple way to add location to your native developed app. But when you do that, you're going to be exposing your devices, or your devices are going to be utilizing the cloud-based services from Google for location. In some customers, some implementations are not going to want to use a public surface for location. They'd rather kind of keep that private. So they'd rather pay for a library to get location services from a private library and have control of all of their data, rather than exposing their devices or their clients to the cloud and to a public service for location. Those are probably the two easy examples. You take and look at the Play Store and app deployment or app updates, and then you look at writing apps and exposing tools like Google Maps. There are certainly a lot of other tools that Google utilizes, but Maps is probably the easy one to take and do an example on for how GMS can make things easy.
Well, it probably also makes sense just because most people can relate to using a map like Google Maps and so forth. So I think there's some relation benefit there. Well, that's good. Well, I appreciate you kind of sharing, what the expectation would be. If the customer wants GMS, then hey, great, that's what we've got moving forward and is available still in the past. But if they wanted AOSP or Android open source, and it's a future device or current device, I should say, moving into the future, they would buy it in the GMS version, and we would just run it in restricted mode to give them that same performance or the user interface and the user capabilities or the device capabilities of Android open source, if I have that correct.
Yes, you do. And then I guess probably the follow-on to be sure that we're clear. When you move away, when you go to GMS restricted mode, you're going to say that, hey, we're going to have an MDM or an EMM, some device management solution to do all of our side loading, to do all of our preparation. We're going to steer away from the Google Play Store, right? So that's, again, we're taking control of all the aspects of the device, and we're putting them into a system or a solution that we've architected to work exactly the way we wanted it to. So that's probably the extension. When we mimic Android open source, we're saying we're going to take care of all of the deployment, all of the configuration, all of the update, and we're going to steer away from the cloud-based services that Google offers in GMS.
Good. That's a good point to make. Harold, thanks so much for speaking to this point. It's a change in the industry that is relatively new, and so I thought it'd be good for the partners to hear about it. Thanks so much, Harold.